for this shipper from Sumas to CSX in Chicago. What would you see when you inquire against the service design system? Well, you'd get information such as you see here on this chart. Let's say that you specified that you want to start at station 66089, which is Sumas, from industry 010000, which is the SPINS identification for that industry. The destination is station 4 balls 9, that's Chicago, going to CSX. The first day, and it shows here the trains that would handle this car, and down at the bottom of this printout it shows that the planned hours are 121.5 hours. That is from that cutoff time, when the customer releases a car at 1600 hours, we will have this car interchanged to CSX at 1930 hours. Assuming the cutoff was on Monday, 1600 hours, it will be interchanged to CSX at 1930 on Saturday. Again, I believe it was very important that you understand all the things that go on in the background that aren't really readily apparent to you when you are inquiring against a service standard. We have a very, very complex network within our company that we are dealing with. A lot of pieces go together. A lot of teamwork is required to make this all come together the way it needs to. Now, this is, again, how we define and build service standards. We have a very integrated network. This capability to find these service standards is set up right now just for loaded shipments for food and consumer products, industrial products, forest products, automotive, cars for intermodal, not trailers and containers. It is not set up for unit coal, unit grain, unit potash. It is not set up for empties either, and those are opportunities that we are pursuing. Now, a lot of effort has been focused on fine-tuning this whole process, and we expect that by the end of July we will have increased the number of service nodes that we have across the system from about 175 to about 190, because we're finding that even the amount of detail that we've focused in on so far isn't enough to give us what we need to really have decent service standards. How are we performing? Well, let's first take a look at 1989. Now, the objective in 1989 that service design started out with was to not be late. Let's make sure that we have standards in place that will give us shipments that are not late. Therefore, we identified percent of cars achieving plan as those that showed up at destination either early or on time. Now, it didn't matter how early. Again, with the objective being not be late. We're just trying to make sure that we weren't late. How did we do against this standard? This chart shows you that we began 1989 at about a 75% level of conformance. That is, 75% of our shipments were either early or on time going to destination. By mid-year, we had gotten that up to about 85% early or on time, but we did not really do much beyond that. We didn't advance beyond that. Another way of taking a look at how we performed is the next chart, which shows you the dispersion of arrival times at destination compared to our standard. And what you see on the fourth bar from the left, I know you won't be able to see the bottom of that from the back of the room, that shows the number of shipments that arrive in the window of 6 hours early to on time for all cars measured in Burlington Northern. You can see that the mode, that is the highest frequency of any activity, was for shipments that arrived at destination 24 or more hours early. In fact, if you carry this to 12 or more hours early, you'd find that of all shipments that Burlington Northern handled in 1989, generally about 40% of them were arriving 12 or more hours early. On the other hand, about 22% of them, on average, were arriving 12 or more hours late at destination. What did that mean? Well, let's say, for example, we told a customer that we would have a shipment to destination in 8 days. And let's say out of 5 shipments that we handled for this customer, we had 1 shipment that showed up at destination 3 days early, 1 was 2 days early, 1 was 1 day early, 1 was on time, and 1 was 1 day late, which was not at all out of the realm of possibility with how we performed last year. We would have said, under our way of measuring ourselves in '89, that we hit 4 out of 5 of those shipments right. That is, only 1 shipment was actually late. We had an 80% level of conformance. I don't have to preach to you about what the customer really thought about that, because the customer tends to say, tell me what you're going to do and do it. If you say you're going to have it here in 5 days, give it to me in 5 days. If you give it to me in 3 days, you are not conforming with my requirements. the customer would have looked at that same example of 3 days early and so on, like I just laid out, as being 20% conformance. That is, we only hit our standard one day, one time out of those 5 shipments. All the others were either early or late. That does not equal consistency. So what we did at the beginning of this year was really re-examine our service design charter. And when you get back to the roots of this effort and you take a look at BN's mission statement, we're really out to committing to providing appropriately disciplined, consistent, and marketable service. What do we mean by appropriately? It doesn't mean get it there the fastest possible, or else a shipper will probably use air freight. It's what can, as John was talking about earlier, with the right level of service. We want to make sure that what we do is right for the customer, but it also is right for BN. We're not in the game of giving things away. We want to make sure we make money with what we're doing. So that's why we talk about appropriately disciplined, consistent, and marketable service. But heavy emphasis on disciplined and consistent and marketable. It has to be sellable, but let's do what we say we're going to do. So on January 1st, we changed the goal. In working with people in the marketing department, in automotive, general merchandise groups, and intermodal, we came up with those performance targets. That is, automotive said if we could consistently achieve performance within a window of 12 hours early to on time, that would be fabulous. The general merchandise groups said if we could consistently perform within a window, a 24-hour window of 12 hours early to 12 hours late, that would be wonderful. Intermodal said if we could do it consistently between a 12-hour early and on-time window, that would be fabulous. So what happened next was Joe Galassi established goals for the operating department linked to these targets, and he tied them directly to our performance evaluations and, as John mentioned earlier, to our bonuses. And this is bonuses for all alpha grade and all number grade employees in the operations department. The goals are set against percent of cars achieving plan. Notice it says nothing in here about train performance. The focus is on car performance. The goals go from what we call performance level 3 to performance level 5. What do those mean? Well, think of your own personal performance evaluation, where level 3 is considered fully satisfactory, level 4 is superior, level 5 is outstanding. There were progressively increasing goals set for the month of March. That was in lieu of a first quarter goal. For a full second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter, you can see that these grow from, at the level 3 level, from 45% during the month of March to 60% in the fourth quarter. To get to level 5, we'd have to get to 75% conformance within those windows I just talked about before by the fourth quarter. In addition, looking at the bottom of this chart, you'll notice that these targets have been weighted. That is, there's been a heavier weight put on the higher goal levels towards the end of the year. Why? To stress the need for continuous improvement and to get our overall service performance raised up. We started the year at a 35% level of conformance, to put this in perspective. Now, John talked earlier about the linkage between this and the bonuses. Joe has said that 20% of the total operating department performance will be driven or will be evaluated based on how we perform against these goals. He said that, therefore, 20% of our bonus pool is at stake. If we achieve at a level 3 performance level throughout the year, Mr. Galassi says that we will be eligible for 70% of that 20% of the pool, of the bonus pool. What does that mean? That means that if we perform at a level 3 throughout the year, we would be giving back 70% times 20%, or we would get 14% of the possible money there, give back 6% of our possible bonus pool. If we hit a level 4, it pays out at 85% against that 20%, and if we hit level 5, it pays out at the full amount. In a way, this is a takeaway program. You have to achieve a level 5 to get the full level of funding. Why did Mr. Galassi say that? He said that, let's face it, the bonus pool is going to be funded by our overall financial performance. We're all aware of those 3 financial criteria that we're using in order to see our bonus pool funded. The board of directors has signed off on that. But Joe says that he did not want to see service performance suffer for the sake of short-term financial goals. And that's why it's so important that we do both. We achieve our service goals and we achieve our financial goals in concert. Nobody wants to see us become a number 1 company more than the operations department, but it can happen at the expense of service. The drop-off in performance last week was caused by the Memorial Day holiday, and there was a number of service consolidations that were done in concert with marketing people, a number, for example, on intermodal trains that were planned into the service, although we didn't adjust our standards for a short-term adjustment like that in performance. Unfortunately, our process is just too onerous to do that. You are seeing, however, continuous improvement. You've gone from 35% level of conformance to these targets overall to 52% last week. We were above 53% the week before that. Now, another way to assess our progress, in addition to this performance against that overall target, is the dispersion of performance against that on-time standard. I showed you earlier this chart, and that was our dispersion of performance for all cars on Burlington Northern during the week of January 6th. And I mentioned that 40% of our shipments were over 12 hours early, and 22% were over 12 hours late. How are we performing against our standard of moving towards a central tendency of doing what we say we're going to do? Well, this shows how we performed last week. I hope you'll notice the marked improvement in hitting the standard overall and a reduction in the number of what we call outliers. That is, performance that's way outside of our standard. Now, as of last week, 24% of our shipments were 12 hours or more early, and 20% were 12 hours or more late for all cars across Burlington Northern. We've made a lot more progress on the early side. Frankly, we have on the late side, and that's not to say that we're not going to make performance or better performance on the late side. It's been easier for us to see improvements on the early side by tightening up on our standards. Another area or a specific area I should say, where we've seen marked improvement is one where I'm afraid we haven't put as much emphasis on service as we ought to in the past. And that is for food and consumer products, industrial products, forest products. For these business units, we've seen an improvement in hitting the new target, that is within the 12-hour early to 12-hour late window, from a level of conformance of 27% to about 50% last week. Again, there was a slight dip in performance last week due to the holiday, but you are seeing marked improvement here. Another way of viewing the improvement is, again, taking a look at the dispersion of arrivals for shipments in these areas. Going back to the first week of the year, you would have found, and this was common throughout 1989 also, that 50% of our shipments were arriving 12 or more hours early. Take a look at the far left-hand side. Those two bars on the left-hand side shows you 12 or more hour early performance. On the far right-hand side, you'll see that 26% of our shipments were arriving 12 or more hours late for the general merchandise groups. As of last week, here's how our performance ranged. 28% were 12 or more hours early, compared to 50% back in the beginning of the year and what was common throughout last year. And we had cut down the 12 or more hours late down to 24%. And that was a slight increase over the previous week. We actually have been doing better than that pre-holiday. So we've made some progress, and I want to stress some. Some may say it's been a lot of progress, but I don't think you'll find many people in the operating department that are satisfied. We have a long way to go. I know that you won't find people in the marketing department satisfied. I just want to acknowledge that we in operations feel the same way about it. But what's next? We've come some way. What's next to do for us? Well, where do we go from here? First off, there is still a lot of work that is ongoing and must continue to be done to adjust the plan and execute the plan. There's still sloppiness in our standards, slop in our standards, and we are working very hard in cleaning that up. Let's face it, there's a lot personally at stake for all of us in operations. We know there's a lot at stake for you because good service is a key to getting your margins up, we believe. There's also a major mindset change that is occurring and has to continue to occur in the operations department on